Hey everyone, this is Rodrigo Medinilla, and in this video I'm going to be analyzing the rhetoric and effectiveness of the argument in a passage from John Green's 2021 collection of essays, The Anthropocene Reviewed, in which Green, acting as an unaffected and omnipresent observer, gives reviews of events from all across human history. Today, we're going to be delving into the passage Monopoly, one of the more modern-leaning chapters in the collection, and how the game of the same name's creation parallels the story and point of the game itself. Now, let me just lay out some context for you. Originally, the game Monopoly was devised by an Elizabeth McGee, a feminist and socialist author and activist in the early 20th century. She designed the game, then known as the landlord's game, to show the benefits of a system where wealth and welfare is shared by the citizens of a state, as well as the detriments of the capitalistic system in place in most contemporary states. Eventually, though, the game spread throughout the United States by word of mouth until it reached one Charles Darrow, who changed aspects of the game until its main goal became to capture properties and bankrupt other players, the complete opposite of McGee's original purpose. This is the version still popular today. In the passage Monopoly, Green argues that the process for conception of the modern game is a parallel to the point of the game itself, that being that one player dominates the others, buying more properties than them and leaving them bankrupt, because Charles Darrow bankrupted Elizabeth McGee and other collaborators of the rights to the idea and the recognition in today's time. A good starting point to analyze a rhetorical argument is to fill out a pass chart, pointing out the purpose of the argument, the audience for the argument, the speaker giving the argument, and the situation the argument is in. The purpose of Green's passage is to debunk the creation myth around the game Monopoly and contextualize its real meaning. The audience of the passage, at least in the context of the book, is an alien or otherwise indifferent observer to the actions of humans. The speaker, or author of the passage, is John Green, if that wasn't obvious by now, who's a prominent edutainment producer and young adult fiction author. The situation of the passage is the hypocrisy, if you could call it that, of the creation and popularization of Monopoly. In the first paragraph of the passage, Green uses a personal anecdote, playing Monopoly with his own family, to relate the game to another game, an app called Universal Paperclips. This connection is superficial at best, with Universal Paperclips not mentioned again in the passage and seemingly no relevance to the topic at hand. The introduction of this passage is not effective because of the use of an irrelevant detail to attempt to establish the author's point, which doesn't really work. In the third paragraph, though, the beginning of Green's analysis of the purpose of Monopoly, Green uses pathos to attempt to explain why Monopoly has lasted so long as a popular game, despite its depressing and pseudo-realistic premise. Green's appeal works here, as his pathetic appeal justifies the reasons behind why Monopoly is so popular, and how the game itself appeals to the human psyche and its self-preserving need to be better than everyone at all costs. He uses strong words, verbs, and diction to establish his point, and he succeeds in creating imagery that many players of Monopoly and other board games can relate to. In the fifth paragraph, Green sets up the beginning of his own contextualization of the origin story of Monopoly by using a generalization of Americans wanting to be like billionaires and applying that to Monopoly and the principles it's based on today. Green's generalization may not be the most effective device used in the passage, sure, but it gets his point across about the thematic inconsistency of the game, being a capitalistic game where the main goal is literally to get rid of the free market. The paragraph's concluding sentence is very effective, though, pushing the conclusion that the creation of the game parallels the game itself and establishing a basis for the following paragraphs. This next paragraph is just basic contextualization in the style of an inspiring origin story akin to that of a superhero. Green talks about the creation myth of Monopoly and likens it to a cliché rags to riches story, setting up its debunking by elaborating further on the real story later. This paragraph works in setting up Green's argument by laying down the foundation of the original story, which Green dissects and takes apart in later paragraphs. The happy-go-lucky tone of the creation myth is, in a way, sarcastic on Green's part, as he debunks this all-American story in a way that addresses the failures of the game and America itself in regards to capitalism and its economic systems, leading back to the original purpose of Monopoly and the landlord's game that McGee devised so long ago. Green uses the ninth paragraph to set up McGee's status as an activist and a champion of equality, using ethos to establish her character by calling attention to a specific anecdote from her life that shows her beliefs and her efforts. This paragraph is effective in establishing McGee's character and her beliefs towards the American government and societal norms in general. Green shows that McGee tries to dispense with social norms and cultural stability in the direction of equality and equity by putting herself out there, challenging common stereotypes and norms, and leading to her establishment as a leading figure in cultural revolution throughout the United States. Now, I'm going to be honest, the 12th paragraph is a little weak. In it, Green uses a logical line of reasoning to establish that since Charles Darrow's version of Monopoly carries the same spelling error as one earlier in the chain of communication, Darrow's version is unequivocally unoriginal. Green's argument makes sense as a part of the argument, but it doesn't have as much of an effect as he would have liked, since this paragraph is being used as a conclusion to an idea, and its concluding sentence's last clause is unsummative and really doesn't resonate very strongly. He does bring it all back together with the 13th paragraph, though. Green delivers a complex analysis of McGee and Darrow's stories, using pathos and alluding to a subversion of the original goal of Monopoly to sum up the conditions McGee has found herself in, being completely left out, with regards to the creation of Monopoly. Green's appeals allow for pity to be drawn on McGee's situation by the reader, effectively establishing the unjustness of Darrow's near-plagiarism of the concept of Monopoly and improving the validity of Green's argument. His discussion of the subversion of McGee's goals amplifies this argument, because it shows that the very thing she was trying to draw attention to and curtail came out of her own creation. To sum everything up, Green states in the 14th paragraph that, in the game of Monopoly, power and resources get unjustly distributed until one individual ends up with everything, and only in that sense is it Charles Darrow's game. Despite the clear bias against the economic system championed by modern Monopoly and exploited by Charles Darrow, Green's appeal to pathos here by describing the unfair premise of Monopoly and comparing it to the truth behind the creation of the game itself works because of the previous description of Darrow's escapades with the concept of Monopoly. In summary, Green's arguments and strategies, especially his pathetic appeals, are mostly effective in establishing the argument in some sections of the text. However, some of the diction and logical reasoning he uses throughout the passage distract from the overall message. In total, I'd give this passage a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you for watching.